only thee. I want only thee, Lord, thee, 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 only thee. Hello friends, Nayaswami Hriman here, and today is the broadcast of the unpublished writings of Paramhansa Yogananda. Talking to you here from the beautiful Camano Island in western Washington. And today I continue in excerpting from Yogananda's commentaries on Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5. So I'm going through the stanzas because chapter 5 is an extraordinary compilation of the teachings of Jesus Christ. I read once by some commentator that Matthew's Gospel, though not the first to have been written down, was really, of the four, the most directed toward the Jews of his time. He was, as we are told by legend or what have you, that he was a tax collector, and so presumably had a broader knowledge. Maybe he spoke Greek, for example, broader knowledge of certain things, including his own Jewish heritage. And in Matthew you see, like in the begats in the beginning, the lineage of Jesus Christ going back to the house of David, the Star of Bethlehem, the three wise men, on and on. He makes the greatest effort, the most obvious effort, to connect the life and teachings of Jesus Christ as the fulfillment of the coming of the Messiah, as foretold in Isaiah and other traditions. Anyway, today we have a difficult one. That's partly why I'm procrastinating, because this is Matthew 5, stanzas 27 through 30, which deal with adultery and lust. I've often said in my classes over the years, in Raja Yoga, in the Eightfold Path, that American culture particularly is accused of being greedy and consumerism and all that. But for all of our possessiveness as far as material things is concerned, we're also very conscious of it. But when it comes to sins of the flesh, as they used to be called, sexuality, we are a very confused lot. And it's a very big subject. And traditional teachings on things like adultery and premarital sex, as it used to be called, it's practically never talked about anymore, I suppose. We're just very much not in alignment with traditional teachings, no matter how you might frame them. So put on your seatbelt or your chastity belt or whatever. Here we go. Ye have heard that it was said by them of old that thou shalt not commit adultery. Okay, fair enough. Even in today's culture, it's, shall we say, frowned upon. But even that isn't true. What about polyamorous relations? Anyway, but I say unto you that whosoever looketh on a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery with her already in his heart. And then he goes on, it gets worse. And if thy right eye offend thee, pluck it out and cast it from thee. For it is profitable for you that one of thy members should perish, and not that thy whole body shall be cast into hell. This is really getting difficult. And if thy right hand offend thee, cut it off and cast it from thee. For it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, not that thy whole body should be cast into hell. Whoa. Okay, have I got myself into trouble here? Where to even start? I think most anyone would at least recognize the the infidelity or whatever of pornography and lust. And it's nowadays, of course, though in olden times it was always men towards women, nowadays, it's all up for grabs. No pun intended. Sorry about that. So, it's a difficult. But what Jesus is saying, and this is the theme in Matthew 5 through the Beatitudes, is that it's not what goes into a mouth that makes him unclean, but what comes out of it, meaning the thoughts and desires of the heart, the attachments and identifications. That's really what we're saying here. I don't want to go on a whole thing of preaching the woes of indiscriminate sex for its own sake. I'm not even required to do that by the commentary. But, we make fun of people. Instinctively, we make fun of people who are excessively promiscuous. We see the suffering and the depredations or whatever of trafficking. In other words, of institutions of prostitution, which you can talk all you want about. Sex workers, I guess, as if they were factory workers or something. But nothing can really hide the sordidness of the worship of the body without regard to the spirit, without regard to the goodwill, the love, the concern, the sensitivity of another soul. That's sort of what it really gets down to. I'm sure there's a lot more to it, but Yogananda points out that in legal context, the lustful thoughts are not illegal, but other kinds of actions, rape and so on, obviously are. So Hindu scriptures, he writes, speak of the following ways of committing adultery. Unfortunately, he used, I think, the only word that was accessible to him, adultery, because it has a very specific meaning in the English language, and so, in a way, it's just simply misleading. Thinking lustfully, even without the person being present, to talk about another person with such intentions, to touch another person. Nowadays people are a lot more sensitive to touching one another playfully or otherwise. More and more that one has to be careful about such motions, and that's certainly appropriate, particularly if they are in fact kind of unconsciously, subconsciously having that purpose for its motivation. Here's an interesting one, though. He says to hold confidential talks with another person with the ultimate hope of sexual union is also proscribed. And of course, the physical union. He makes the analogy, and it's a good analogy as far as analogies go, of right use of sex in regard to food. And I remember when I gave classes, it was just a lot less intimidating to do that. I would talk about food and invite the students to cross over to sexuality. But we should eat to bring nutrition to our bodies, and of course, sort of technically, the purpose of sex is to procreate. Oh, here comes my garbage truck, right on time, right in the middle of my broadcast. Okay, don't forget to stop. Oh, good, he's stopping to get my garbage. Anyway, so, but that's not there's a problem I have with that, which is Yogananda himself was known as a great cook. He developed tasty recipes to encourage vegetarianism, for example, here in America at a time when it was, not anything like it is today. And so he himself admitted that food, that food, cooked food, a meal, needs to be pleasing to the eye and pleasing to the palate, and not just, rock hard, bare bones, nutritious. And it's obvious that in terms of sexuality and the attraction of one to another, it's all of that's an obvious purpose. The purpose of both delectable food and delectable sex, if you want to put it that way, is to make it happen. So you can't say there's anything wrong with it. It just is what it is. It's simply when you mistake the one for the other. In other words, I think the normal way of looking at sex is if there's commitment, if there's, in truth, a friendship, an attraction that goes beyond only sex. You see, we are not just bodies, we are not just animals, as it were. We are also souls. And so, I don't think it's fair to say that the purpose of sex is to procreate only. It's also to bring people together and to learn to love. So it's very nuanced, and there's a lot I could say about modern trends, such as in transgender and the what used to be the gay movement. In my mind, from the standpoint of the soul, I acknowledge these trends as having, at least spiritually, as I like to view it, as having the deeper than conscious impulse in human consciousness to transcend the stereotypes and the self-identification and the commitment to viewing one another in sexual terms or gender terms, not merely sexual, gender roles, roles. So I think there's a lot of good things happening in our culture, but unfortunately, with the spread of things like pornography, I do want to say, though, that something that's equally unpopular, but I'm going to say it anyway, if I can find it. Maybe I can't. But basically, he says, well, I can't find it, doggone it. But he acknowledges something that isn't acknowledged, which is it's not just, well, going back to the old standard stereotypes of men lusting after women now, just to follow that pattern. It's not just that. A woman who dresses to attract that level of attention is a player in the game. That's all I feel I can say at this time and for our purposes here today. But it takes two to tango, as we used to say long ago. And so this is a difficult subject, and it's such a candy store of sexual exploration, no holds bar in our society, that there's not too much one can say. One thing I'll end with, Yogananda, when he first came here, 20s and 30s, he noted the growing prevalence of divorce, and he decried that for obvious reasons I don't need to explain. And then he contrasted that with India, where marriages were still holding together, as it were. But then he paused and he said, well, I guess people here, through multiple divorces, let's say, or partners, find out sooner that human love will never satisfy the soul of our heart or the heart of our soul. Okay, great souls, I did my duty on a difficult subject, and I won't say that I hope you enjoyed it, but I did what I needed to do.